Buenos, Buenos and Hafide, this informational hearing of the Committee on Infrastructure, Economic Development, Simon Sanchez High School, Disability Service, Self-Determination and Historic Preservation, Housing, Public Accountability, and the Guam Buildup is called to order. It is currently 2:01 p.m., Friday, May 5th, 2023. This afternoon, the committee will hear and accept testimony on Guam's minimum wage, notice requirements in accordance of the Open Government Law and 37th Guam Legislature Standing Rules. The 5-day notice was given April 28, 2023, and the 48-hour notice was on May 3rd, 2023, and was provided to senators, stakeholders, and local media. In addition, the notice of this hearing was also posted and available on the Guam Legislature's website. Materials for this hearing were shared in the committee drive and are available for printing upon request. For sign-in convenience, please scan the QR code on the table over there, displayed at the entrance, or on your browser input bit.ly/RABQ_sign-in. Those testifying will be allowed to present their written or oral testimony, whether for or against. Welcome remarks. Joining me today is Senator Shelton. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And then Sizos Masi to Senator Chris Duenas for joining me as well. I thank you all for being here today for this important informational briefing about our island's minimum wage. We must work together to make sure the legislation we create provides both economic and social stability for everyone in our community. I understand that from the economic perspective, a higher minimum wage would give more people access to financial security and stability. On the other hand, some contend that increasing the minimum wage could lead to job loss and negatively impact the business community in Guam. That is why I am eager to hear from all the stakeholders as we work towards creating a fair and effective solution that considers both sides of the table for this argument. My goal is to ensure that any legislation we address today will benefit the people and the business of Guam. Before we proceed the discussion and the items on this agenda, I'd like to set out some ground rules as we conduct business today. The chair will invite individuals who have signed up to testify. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Individuals testifying, I ask that you please state your name for the record and your position if applicable. Testimony shall be confined to the substance and nature of the item on the agenda that may be read. An extended testimony should be summarized to 5 minutes at least. Once you are done, please remain in the room for questions and additional testimony as desired by the members of this committee. The order of questioning will begin with our panel of senators here. Each member will be allowed to pose 2 questions and 5 minutes for discussion. Again, questions shall be confined to the substance and nature of the item on the agenda. Personal interference or character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is absolutely not permitted. All must abide by the rules of conduct and quality assurance standards. Any violation of these rules or conduct will result in the removal of the public hearing room. So just masi everyone for your understanding and cooperation for the following of our rules in today's business. Let's begin the committee. Since the committee has received written testimony from NOAA, Austin, the Employers Council, and are both available in the committee drive, and I'll go ahead and read NOAA's testimony. My name is Noah Austin, a father of 4 and extremely concerned citizen who has been in the workforce of Guam since I graduated from GW High School in 2011. I submit this written testimony in hope that shifting your perspective to focus on what matters the most, the masses of our people who are the working class and living paycheck to paycheck trying to make it work. The working class people of Guam are struggling. We get paid less than the stateside do, while our cost of living is higher. Many business-minded individuals say it's best to let the market dictate wages. The market is not concerned with working people and their ability to survive. The market is if the minimum wage is not a living wage but a starting wage, then we are saying when you start out contributing to society, economy, paying taxes, etc., you do not deserve to be paid enough to live. You can make double the minimum wage and still not be able to afford the cost of living here. I'm tired of the business's interests being put before the working class people's interests, and our interests are simply having the ability to survive and live decently in the modern era. I'm tired of the excuses as to why working class people cannot be helped. I am tired of the lives of the people being only valued in the terms of empower the working class in by cutting taxes or fees on the businesses. We either care about the working class or we don't. Without the working class, nothing will get done. The economy would screech to a halt. I await that day the working class is given the respect they deserve. If our elected officials or business leaders do not believe that the working class people deserve to be able to afford a decent life, just tell us straight. Again, that is Noah Austin testimony. It's in the tribe as well. I would like to call individuals here who have signed in for their written testimony, and I'll call up Senator Klitsky to the table. And then I will have Miss Catherine Castro, Yolanda Padrones, or no, she's just like observing. Tina Garcia. Okay, Javina Lujan. She just. Ms. Lujan, you gave us your written testimony. Did you want to say it, or it's okay? You can. Okay, you can come up to the table. Again, just state your name for the record, and then you can proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Robert Klitsky, and I'd start out by saying that I could never understand why there was so much partying going on the 5th of May. Now I know. My name is Robert Klitsky. My occupation is I am the host of the top-rated afternoon talk show in the Western Pacific. It's called Tall Tales. This is my testimony. The minimum wage is zero. That is, the minimum wage is zero for many. It's against our law to hire anyone and pay him less than $9.25 per hour. For the person whose labor is not worth $9.25, there is no job, sentencing him to unemployment. Here are some considerations. 1, I went to work on my first real job when I was 15, back in 1954, at 55 cents an hour. I was probably worth about 35 cents an hour. I had to learn what it meant to have a job. I learned and came to grips with the fact that being a soda jerk at King Morgan Drugstore would never yield a living wage, nor was it a career position. 2, the statutory minimum wage is really if the statutory minimum wage is really effective at raising as you are raising real wages, why are we screwing around with minuscule amounts like $9.25 an hour? Why not go for $92.50 an hour so that everybody can be rich? Well, I use the term real wage. Here's what real wage means. A real wage rate is a nominal wage rate divided by the price of a good and is a transparent measure of how much the good an hour of work buys. It provides an important indicator of the living standard of workers and also of the productivity of workers. A really good benchmark for the real wages is the price of a Big Mac. As the value of the currency decreases, the price of a Big Mac goes up. So if you're making $9.25 an hour, and that's the minimum wage, and the minimum wage goes up by $3 an hour, but the price of a Big Mac doubles, you've lost money, you haven't made money. The importance is that we take into consider real wages rather than dollar amounts. Money is not wealth. It's an indicator of wealth, but it is not wealth. Point 3, assuming the difference as you were assuming the existence of Homo economicus as the default employer, how does the 15-year-old or an occupationally immature adult learn what it means to have a job? I use the term Homo economicus. And I am a lawyer, after all, and the more Latin you use in your papers, the more money you can charge. So I just couldn't resist that one. Homo economicus is a cornerstone of neoclassical economics approach, particularly in microeconomics. In modern economics, the neoclassical theory rests on three assumptions: rational decisions, maximization of utility, and a self-interested orientation. In other words, Homo economicus, or economic man, means that a man will ordinarily do that which improves his lot as much as he can. If he's in business, he will make as much profit as he can. If he's working for wages, he will get the job that pays him the most. So going back to that sentence, assuming the existence of Homo economicus as the default employer, how does a 15-year-old or an occupationally immature adult learn what it means to have a job? Note well, Homo economicus will not pay for labor at a rate higher than its value. No law can increase the value of a person's labor, but perhaps in times of labor scarcity, a minimum wage law can engage in wealth redistribution by providing what amounts to a subsidy to one who is marginally productive. Point 4, I submit that your goal should be an effective, efficient government that provides basic services in accordance with the rule of law on at least a break-even basis. While the phrase basic services will evoke quibbling on some parts, I submit that wealth distribution ain't it. I hold that the basic services does not include setting the price of anything. Government should not set the price of anything. And I did note that regulated industries are the rule that proves the exception, things like power, water, utilities, et cetera. But I hold that basic services does not include setting the price of anything, certainly not labor. Attempts to do so distorts markets and causes misallocation of capital. That's my testimony, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee. Given the clarity, brevity, and depth of my presentation, it would seem that there could not possibly be questions, but I've been surprised before. So. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Klitsky, for your testimony. Now go ahead and proceed to Ms. Catherine.
Hapaday Chairman, Quinata, members of the committee and members of the 37th Guam Legislature. My name is Catherine Castro and I'm the president of the Guam Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Chamber, we appreciate the opportunity to provide our views regarding the possibility of increasing the minimum wage for Guam. The Chamber maintains that the minimum wage is not meant to be a living wage. We have always held a position that a minimum wage is a starting wage and should be determined by market conditions, not arbitrarily dictated by government mandate. As we have shared over the past several years on minimum wage discussions, most of our business entities in Guam are small businesses, many with limited resources. Therefore, when the government establishes mandates such as a tax or minimum wage increase or any other effort that raises the cost of operating a business, it's our local small businesses that are impacted the most. If today the minimum wage was increased, it would negatively impact Guam's economic recovery by forcing businesses to increase costs at the cash register, reconsider staffing options, or even close down. With the 2018 increase in the business privilege tax, the increase in the real estate taxes of property valued at $1 million or more, plus the devastating economic conditions caused by the pandemic, we are already challenged with the increase in the cost of basic everyday commodities, such as milk, bread, baby formula, diapers, which have escalated dramatically. Furthermore, with the continuation of anti-business measures resonating as government policies in this political environment, even operating a business will continue to be difficult. Most businesses are interested in keeping their employees and compensating them in the amounts well above the minimum wage. And in Guam, many in the private sector do just that. The average annual increase in the private sector is anywhere between 3 to 5%, and in most cases, these raises are built into budgets. Nothing prevents any business from providing increments and benefits well above these thresholds. Likewise, any employee who brings skill sets and experiences to the table would be able to command higher wages. Interestingly, according to numbers released by the Guam Department of Labor's Bureau of Statistics and Plans, the average hourly wage earned by a Government of Guam employee is $32.14 an hour, while the average hourly wage by a private sector employee is $16.70 per hour, both of which are well above minimum wage earnings. If the issue is to increase the standard of living of our island residents, especially those earning minimum wage, why not focus our efforts on funding initiatives that will make a real difference, such as improving the quality of our public education system to reduce dropout rates and produce more students with the skills that are relevant and competitive in today and tomorrow's marketplace? Why not support workforce development and training programs designed to enhance the skill sets and promote workforce-ready citizens? Why not restructure our welfare programs to remove the current disincentives to work or receive wage gains? Why not continue to provide our unskilled workers the opportunity to acquire the relevant job skills necessary to move up the career ladder that can only come from on-the-job training and at wages that make sense to our businesses and job creators? Though much work needs to be done, these are far better solutions to balance the need for increased economic productivity against the concern of all island residents to enhance their standard of living than what increasing the minimum wage will do. Our organization represents over 400 businesses and organizations which employ approximately 30,000 individuals in Guam, and it is our responsibility to advocate for good, sound public policy when it comes to issues that not only unfavorably impact the operating expenses of our members, but also affect investor confidence in creating a business-friendly environment for Guam. Our members are proud community partners who have worked collaboratively with government officials over the years in helping to build the state of the island we had before the pandemic impacted the world and became a global crisis. These are business entities that have taken care of their employees and believe that the market should determine wage levels, not government-imposed mandates. To summarize, we respectfully ask for your careful consideration for the long-term consequences of increasing the minimum wage on our economic competitiveness, our ability to keep doors open, and job creation effectiveness if passed. We urge you not to act on increasing the minimum wage for Guam. Thank you for this opportunity to bring the concerns of the members of the Guam Chamber of Commerce to your attention.
Sidos Masi Ms. Kat. Thank you again. I'll now recognize Ms. Jovina Lujan, and then Ms. Mary Rhodes, if you can join us at the table.
Good afternoon, Senator Quinata and members of the committee. My name is Jovina Lujan. I am merchandise manager at DKSH Guam. We are more commonly known as the retail operators of the Carinel stores in Tumuning and Tuman. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input on Guam's minimum wage and legislative considerations on increasing its legal mandate for Guam. Overall, as longtime commercial retail operators on Guam, we at DKSH Guam, Inc. share the view that the minimum wage was never designed as a living wage, but rather it was enacted into law as a starting wage for new entrants to the workplace at all ages from all backgrounds. We agree and share the sentiment that economic market conditions should be the primary foundation upon which starting wage earnings should be determined. Speaking from our retail perspective on the subject, many of us, and that is those of us in retail, employ a host of mechanisms designed to provide compensation to employees at all levels in our operation, whether they be entry-level employees and others throughout the rank and file of our retail operations. Employees, for example, in all our stores are provided with one, competitive base wages dictated by their respective occupational duties and levels of proficiency they bring to the workplace. 2, this income is supplemented with commission earnings, which are generally applied whenever performance meets seasonal predetermined targets throughout the year. And lastly, 3, annual bonus earnings are also provided whenever individual, team, and total company performance targets are met or exceeded. While an upward adjustment to Guam's minimum wage may be a well-intended measure, we would caution members of this committee from considering such an adjustment at a time when sectors of our community, most especially our tourism sector, are still in the early, dynamic, and fragile stages of recovery. There was a time, when most residents of the island considered that the best employment and career opportunities existed only in the public sector, primarily because Guam and the federal wages were generally much higher than the private sector at the starting wage level. While that may remain true to some extent, in today's market, what is often overlooked is, given a favorable climate of economic growth, many private sector employees often grow to earn income exceeding their counterparts in the public sector over time. And by this example, what I'm referring to is, if you compared the entry-level wage at the time an entry-level employee came into the workforce, the wage earnings in the public sector are generally higher than that of the private sector. And Catherine here just gave some illustrations on the disparity between public and private sector wages as an example. However, what's often overlooked is that over a period of time, let's say 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and so forth, if you were to compare that same private sector career employee to his or her counterpart in the public sector, you will find that there are many countless examples where private sector wage earnings far exceeded that of their counterparts in the public sector. And again, I'll qualify that statement. That is based on a condition of favorable economic climate. All right, now, while that may vary, while that may remain true to some extent in today's market, again, I'm sorry, I'm going back over the same statement. While this may be varied across different commercial businesses in the private sector, let me take this opportunity to affirm that such conditions do exist on island. All right, there are many examples of people that are working in the private sector over time that are earning well in excess of their counterparts in the public sector. Again, this development is directly related to a favorable climate of economic growth. All right. Now, let me say this. All three of you senators present today are either authors or co-signers on the local employer education assistance supplement bills that is going to come before the legislature on May 9th. Let me say, first of all, thank you to all of you who are advocates of those three legislations. The reason I mention that, while it is indirectly relevant to the minimum wage proposal or roundtable that you are deliberating on today, is to point out simply that many small businesses, whether they are directly or indirectly tied to tourism, are still very much at the very early stage of the recovery. Now, it's been reported, it's not private information, it's very public, that tourism year-to-date 2023 is at maybe 30% of the recovery. Many people in the community, both business and the government, would look at that as saying tourism, where we stand today, is still down 70%. And so I bring that to light, indirectly related to the minimum wage issue, because as we speak today, there are businesses closing every day. There are businesses that remain permanently and temporarily closed even at this time, and many that continue to sit on the line. All right, now, the academic community at the University of Guam did a very good job at documenting the state of the economy in direct connection to tourism today. There was a study done, as you know, in 2021, and then an update to that study in 2022. Without going too deep on the topic, all I want to say here is that the academic community have done a very good job at documenting where we are in the economy. So as we stand today, the timing is not good. Moreover, we implore all 15 members of the legislature to favorably support the enactment of the LEAP supplement when the time comes and you deliberate on that measure on May 9th. Now, to impose an increase, a forced increase by legal statute at this particular time, at this particular stage in the economic recovery, would be somewhat catastrophic, depending on which level or which sectors of tourism and the small business you would be talking to or looking at, and where that sector may be or may be standing today in the recovery phase. Now, without a doubt, forcing an increase to the prevailing minimum wage is going to inevitably cause additional contraction in terms of the availability of jobs. Now, minimum wages are intended to draw entry-level employees who are just entering the workplace at various levels, whether they are retirees coming back to work, or they are young career people, part-time college students, and the like. But I will say to you that the countless examples of managers in the private sector today that are at that level that I mentioned and referred to earlier, earning income way above their counterparts in the public sector, is the truth. That's why businesses and business organizations very often use the phrase, let market conditions dictate what be or serve as the foundation to determine what those entry-level wages should be. Now, if you go back at the principles as to why these types of people exist, you're going to find yourself coming back to the age-old principles. Get a good education, work hard, come to work on time, be a reliable employee, exercise enthusiasm, take an interest to really learn all you can at where you are, because in due time, the fruit of your labor will indeed pay off. And so, senators, in closing, I just want to say thank you for those of you who support the LEAP supplement. Thank you for opening the roundtable, Senator Quinata, and giving us the opportunity to input into that. We agree it may be well-intended, but we caution you against that at this particular fragile moment in the island's economic recovery, for all the reasons that all of you are very well familiar in, as to why there is justification for the LEAP supplement and the enactment of those bills. In closing, we appreciate the opportunity to speak into legislative deliberations on this subject and would be happy to provide further assistance as may be needed as senators embrace the minimum wage in the coming weeks. Thank you. Situs Masi.
Situs Masi, Ms. Lujan. And we'll go to Ms. Tina Garcia now.
Thank you, Hafaday, Senator Quinata, Senator Shelton, and Senator Dueñas. My name is Tina Garcia. I'm the Public Finance Manager for the Guam Economic Development Authority, and I'm here on behalf of Melanie Mendiola, who apologizes for her absence. And we are here to participate in this discussion. Just some general points. GEDA's primary role is to promote the sustainable growth of our economy by helping our local businesses grow organically and attracting external investment. GEDA's current priority is towards economic diversification in industries that have higher paying jobs and a smaller proportion of entry-level minimum wage, to include telecommunications, aqua and agriculture technological advances, and so on. By contrast, Guam built tourism on low wages, so it has certainly contributed to our current economic state, but for the future, we can be more judicious about the industry's proportion of minimum wage versus higher wage jobs. We don't see external investment being hurt solely by varying levels of minimum wage across states and territories, nor does the lowest minimum wage payer in the nation drive investment. However, as far as it coexists with other business unfriendly policies, in Guam's case, the 5-year lease law, issues with the SHPO, issues with EPA, all of these things drive investment away. In GEDA's position, we feel raises in minimum wage should be revised more regularly than it is, rather every 7 to 10 years, and perhaps we peg an increase to an index such as the cost of living and reset it biannually. With that, we are here to further participate, and we'll be able to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. I'll recognize Ms. Rhodes now. Thank you for joining us.
Half a day, and thank you again, Senator Quinata, for having this informational briefing. It's really important that as we consider these options, or in lieu, as well as all of the additional things that have been coming through the legislature, it's really important that we have this opportunity as private sector to discuss the impact that this would have in the economy as well as to our island as a whole. So on behalf of the Guam Hotel Restaurant Association, all of our members have been giving feedback on this, and we do sincerely appreciate the opportunity again to speak before an actual bill is produced. And this is really more of a long-term strategic plan, I think, rather than a short-term, because as previous individuals have mentioned, obviously our economy has really taken a hit after COVID, during COVID and right after, and there are a lot of challenges that we're all dealing with. In as much as the government has seen excess revenues, that primarily is coming from federal dollars, federal funding, as well as with the increase in the construction trades with the ancillary services supporting the construction industry due to the buildup. But as far as the other sectors here on Guam, you don't see those increases coming in as much as that. And so we have to be sensitive to the fact that the economy as a whole is extremely challenged. And I think that we want everything that is good for Guam as a whole. And so I think it's very important that we really identify that there was a public law that was passed previously. It's Public Law 32-178 that requires, we did this back in 2015 and 16 when the 50-cent wage increase took place instead of $1. It was required by law to do an economic impact study before any wage increase should be considered. So I really strongly suggest that we follow suit with that. and we follow Public Law 32-178, requiring an economic impact study to be conducted before any additional wage increase is made. Because we have so many service sectors, or so many sectors within Guam, that it's disproportionate, there's disparity with the revenue expectations that everybody has, and really just an understanding from the economy as a whole on what this would do to our small businesses, especially when you know that 80% of our market includes small business owners and employees. It's an 80-20 scale, right? So it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of our businesses are small businesses, but they only employ 20% of our market, whereas 20% of the large businesses employ 80% of the market. And so we really have to consider that, because as businesses are trying to still recover, they're not operating with full staff, and this would definitely impair their ability to hire more and get back to their full FTE hires that they were hoping to hire. Even with, we hope that, of course, with LEAP, that will be approved at some point, even with the funding from LEAP and any other program that will benefit private sector, we know that any additional cost increases will certainly hinder any progress that we might have made or might have intended with the market. The market alone is dealing with increases of the cost of goods, shipping, inflation, cost of utilities. I mean, just utilities alone, where businesses didn't have that in their 5-year, 2 to 5 year plan. I mean, just those alone, and having to remain competitive is extremely challenging for all of the businesses. But if we could really look at Public Law 32-178 again, that it requires an economic impact. And I believe that was Senator Yamashita, Eileen Yamashita, who had introduced that and got that passed into law, requiring a study to be done. With regards to the impact that any kind of increase will have, I'd like to just share some of the HR impacts. We're going to see reduced employment. Even any kind of increase that will address in the intention of wanting to pay people more, because I understand that inflation is there, cost of goods have increased, but if we have additional pressure on businesses to pay people more at this time while we're in economic recovery, it will reduce employment. It will also reduce entry-level jobs. We'll also see changes from full-time to part-time positions, and then businesses will also choose to hire casual employees. What is more concerning is the compression of wages. I know that, Senator, we've talked a lot about this, and your intention is possibly go to $11 first, maybe up to $15 at some point, but even going to $11, as Mrs. Castro had stated, that a lot of sectors, the private sector is actually paying above minimum wage right now, and I think that's what people don't understand, is the market conditions have actually increased the hourly wage naturally. And that is what we're saying, is that the market conditions should really determine the wage that employers have. The minimum wage is really for entry-level positions. It's not meant for everybody to be at that wage. So the market itself will naturally challenge the businesses to be more competitive. And so we've seen that. But what will happen is the rest of the employees outside of frontline, you're going to have a compression of wages. So imagine long-term employees who have been with a company at 10 years or even a couple of years, and then all of a sudden they're dealing with entry-level employees. You're going to have inequity with staffing and with having to appropriately adjust your wages to really satisfy everybody across the board. Because any increase in wage right now will definitely push up that ceiling of where everybody is at. And then we're going to have turnover costs. Really, already employers are dealing with a hard time hiring right now, and then they're going to have increased costs in recruiting, training, and retention. Staff will have to be adjusted. If we cannot hire, or if people freeze positions or just choose to operate at a lower staffing level, you're going to see productivity and quality of service go down, because you're going to have fewer employees overall. you're going to have to change compensation programs overall, where businesses right now are trying to compete by adding more benefits today. So that's a really good thing when employers are looking to, on top of your wages, add additional programs like healthcare, life insurance, disability, to be more attractive to compete with national companies. I think that that should be the focus on looking at total compensation, where we can add value to the employee rather than just their wage. You're also going to see fringe benefits change and any perks that they get as part of their job. They'll have to adjust that because everything comes at a cost. And so there will be negative effects on this decision should we increase minimum wage. Additional taxes, you're going to see 1/3 of the income. If you're going to have more people paid at a higher, or you're going to have people paid at a higher rate and with lower hiring, then you're still going to see, you're not going to see all of it come into income tax because there will be a reduction in force with a lot of companies. You're also going to reduce the jobs for 14 to 18-year-olds for minors who are going to be working, because I don't see employers really offering an entry-level job to individuals who aren't going to be able to work full-time. And so you're going to see reduction in jobs for people who are 14 to 18 years old. And then you're going to have the selective hiring process. Right now, Guam, Guam has continued to have issues with the education system, as we all know. And Ms. Castro again, and also Ms. Lujan also mentioned, other types of alternative ways to develop people. But hiring, it'll be a more selective process because, just the literacy rate, being able to pass an exam, being able to pass a certification, people are going to be expected to do more with any increases in our wage. As stated by multiple people here, minimum wage is not supposed to be a living wage. And you're going to see definitely businesses, when they're paying a higher wage, they don't pay just that wage. They're paying increases in income tax. They're paying increases in total. Their taxes are going to increase as well. So it's not just the wage that increases, it's the total cost of hiring employees will increase for the employer. You're going to start to see any increases that is going to come into a company where they have to give out more. You're going to see increased prices in the goods and services that we all receive. And again, you're going to see total impact to any fringe benefits and things like that. With regards to the scale effect, once you start seeing increased costs, you will see those, and it will have a multiplier effect where, let's say, one of your vendors, you're supporting a company and there are 3 vendors. If all 3 vendors are increasing their pricing, you're going to see that company, if it's a retail company, also increase their pricing because every other person had to increase their price. So it's going to have that multiplier effect on goods and services. It's not a straight shot of if you increase me $2, everybody goes up $2 because there's taxes in that. And now you're getting impacted by every other company, supplier, vendor with their increases as well. So it will have a multiplier effect on that. And then consumers will purchase fewer goods. As much as we want to increase wages because people need to get paid more to afford things, you're going to see fewer purchasing. Now, we've seen that with other types of instances in the past where consumer price index has gone down anytime there are increases in taxes or increases in the economy. And that's because people will start to discern a lot more of where they spend their money. And just because if we increase $2 in taxes, in wages, they're not going to necessarily receive $2 because they're also going to pay more in taxes. The other issue is we have 50,000 unemployed people on Guam from the last study that was done, and with those 50,000 people, they're also getting welfare benefits. And there are a lot of people who are still part-time today and availing of welfare benefits. And so that scale of getting them to be at $28,000, for example, we're going to have more people take fewer hours because they want to keep their welfare benefits. And that's a real challenge. And I think that's where the government really needs to work with private sector to identify ways to get people off of public assistance and into getting a job. If we have 50,000 people, imagine all the employers who need employees today. it exacerbates the problem because we cannot attract people who are unemployed if they're getting more in public assistance. And that's just not good for Guam. It's not good for Guam at all. I know it may mean more federal dollars to Guam because we have more people in public assistance, but it really cripples the industries and it cripples our economy overall. And so the employers will hire fewer workers. The substitution effect of where we're going to reduce use of low-wage workers, again, a lot of private sector, especially in the hospitality industry, they pay more than just the wage. Now, because Department of Labor, they have to identify just the wage, because that is what they're paying hourly, it does not mean that's their total compensation. They get a whole lot more with total compensation with service charge and tips. Technology is the way to go to really identify, if we're going to move to a higher wage, we need to identify additional programs where technology is also in place. Because if we're going to hire fewer people, more companies are going to have to look for technological solutions to replace individuals. And that's what will naturally happen. That is what has happened to the service sector in the States. Because this is a nationwide problem where labor and hiring right now, the workforce, not a lot of people are going back to work, so businesses have had to adjust, and they've implemented technological solutions to replace people. The impact, I know that Mrs. Castro also mentioned that in between the years, a very difficult time because of budget season, and then also contracts are also negotiated. Some contracts are negotiated 12 to 18 months out, and so any increases in costs, whether you're construction, hotel, tour agent, all of their prices are set for at least minimum 12 months to 18 months. And so really our job is to help create jobs. It's also to help grow our economy, and I know that that's a real challenge right now with everything that is pressing, and we want to at least ask our senators to look at more programs to help grow our economy, not put it in a worse position by adding more costs. And as Ms. Castro also mentioned, is developing more skilled workers. The focus that everybody has with Department of Education through this summer to get the buildings going, there are a lot of opportunities even with Department of Labor. GHRA has had apprenticeships since 1986, so we know all the programs available out there. The challenge is a lot of people are on public assistance and not really seeking a job. And we need to look at those timelines on how long they can remain in public assistance. Some of those programs only go for a couple months, up to 5 years. And so we need to ensure they're being monitored and reinforce those timelines so not everybody stays on that. Because I think when you have people actively working and the market conditions go up with regards to the wages, I don't think this conversation is really necessary if people are going to come into the market and we're already way above. But we need to focus on getting more skilled workers out there, better performance and increased productivity, because a skilled workforce will demand a higher wage. And that is what we're seeing right now, especially with the construction trades. So I implore the legislature to really look at alternative ways to get people back to work, to get them skilled, to get them trained, and for businesses to benefit from more programs like GEDA's program, where a lot of the funding will go towards labor to get people to incentivize people to come back to work. And there are many ideas we've shared here at the legislature where we can try to create more programs to get people back to work. And I think that's where the focus really should be. And minimum wage should be tabled until we can find solutions for that first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Mr. Casper Bauer. And then Ms. Gill, can you go ahead and proceed to the far right chair? Or your far left? Thank you so much. You can proceed. Press the mic button and then you can proceed.
Buenas, Senators. I'm here today to give not only my opinion, but basically what we feel in our economy, the tourism economy especially, the consensus on what it's going to take to rebuild our industry. So I know that most of the main points has been raised, so I think I'll just cover a couple of things. The advantage right now is for the employer. No, it's for the employee. We're constantly seeing the moving of employees to different jobs for higher pay every day because there's a shortage onto the base, and actually we've lost a lot of talent back to the States. You know, and a lot of the talent that I had that even went back to the States were people that we invested in, people that we had invested in for professional positions in accounting, CPAs, et cetera, helped them to get green cards, citizenship, and they're gone. And so it takes a long time to rebuild that cycle. And I think you know that. The second problem I see is this, is that Saipan has the advantage over Guam for tourism. If we wanted to see a recovery, Saipan is just beautiful. I mean, their lagoons are bigger and better. They may not have as many hotels as we have at that level, but at $7.25 minimum wage, they can do things that we can't do. Now, we know that Tinian is going to build up, but Tinian will not have nearly the magnitude of buildup that we're seeing on Guam. I currently have the privilege and pleasure of being on the USO board. And in our last meeting, it was made public that this buildup is going to far, far exceed the original projections. That we're going to be building a big Army base because of Space Force, and that all of the different entities are expecting to practically double the current size right now of the forces, excluding Army Guard and the other guards. So with that being said, the free marketplace will determine what is going to be the right wage, and it's going to be high. But when we say minimum wage, I think we've heard it, it's entry level. Something that I got one time when I worked at Chuck Cellar, if you can even remember where that place is, in Tumon. It was a restaurant. Some people are smiling because they had a good after evening program there on the weekends. But bottom line is this, is people, our entry-level folks for minimum wage are going to be coming maybe from Micronesia like it was in the early days. And for those of you who would like to hear a little history, when the Palace Hotel, which was the Sheraton and now is called the Regal Royal, was being built, there weren't enough people to fill the staff. So they started recruiting from the FSM. And they actually built a dorm or an apartment building where they housed these folks and trained them how to brush their teeth, how to comb their hair, how to dress, how to, have certain etiquettes before they could even go into the hotel and work, whatever position. I've been thinking during this last 3 years is, I think we're going to be coming to a point where we're going to have to import minimum wage earners, first-time employees. And that's going to have an incredible cost on the company, but it'll be an investment for Guam for the future and the talent. We can see today that the second and third generation of people from Micronesia are very, very good. You'll find them in our stores, you'll find them in management position, you'll see them in the fast foods, and that was the contribution of bringing those people back about 40 to 30 years ago. And so I think that right now this would be a very tough time and an unreasonable time to raise a minimum wage when nobody is attracting anybody for minimum wage. But we will need to have some incentive for young people to want to get a job and not delay their opportunity by waiting till they're 19 or 20 years old to finally get something where they have to learn some responsibility and some respect and organization. So for those 15-year-olds who get a permit, I remember I would hire every summer. I would go to even Department of Labor if they were a little underage and get a waiver for them to help out in our tourism business. And those people have grown to accelerate faster than maybe their peers because they had a chance early. And so that's my testimony today, and I appreciate the opportunity to represent our many years of experience and hope that you can see the merits in that. Thank you so much.
Mr. Casper Bauer. I believe we'll go ahead and proceed to Ms. Gill. But before we proceed, Senator Klitsky, did you need to leave? I know you asked to go first, but did you? Okay, we want to make sure.
I can stay yeah, this is very interesting, Mr. Chairman, so I want to stay as long as I can.
Of course.
But
just want to make sure you don't lose ratings on your tall tales.
Thank you very much for your consideration, sir.
Of course. Ms. Gill, I'll go ahead and have AV go ahead and prompt up your slides, or did you have an opening statement first?
Well, they can pop it up while I go, but first I just really wanted to thank you for having this informational briefing, the way you presented it, as first starting a kind of a dialogue or at least a discussion to really have the opportunity to hear everything that's out there right now, as opposed to jumping straight into this. So I do appreciate your approach with this and opening up discussion. So I have prepared a little presentation for those that like to have a little backup as they go along. Just a little background, I represent the Employers Council. The Employers Council has been on Guam since 1966. It's been set up just to help employers, particularly around trying to be the best employers they can be, ensuring that they have fairer and legal workplaces and are abreast of the latest trends. And we currently have some 80 members, but of those 80 members, several are like corporations that have many different companies under them. Altogether, they represent a little over 10,000 employees on island. And again, we're thankful that you had this opened up for us to come and discuss. Just starting off the discussion first about minimum wage. Right now, of course, minimum wage is $9.25, and we've heard that there's proposals to bring it up as high as $15, perhaps, hopefully. I mean, if it does come to that in an incremental fashion, but $15, that's more than, a 62%. That's an extreme jump from where we are today. So we can jump through a couple of slides here. For the Employers Council, particularly at this time, coming straight off the pandemic, so there are many companies that are still getting back into gear, working with that, as well as coming off a recent increase, is against any current increase over the next few years. And at the very, very minimum, we do ask our senators to approach this in a measured, balanced, and incremental way whenever looking at the minimum wage. So that's one thing we just really would ask. But our big question is also, what is prompting this discussion at this time? Is there anything particular? Is it just anecdotal comments from something? Is there some kind of intuition? Because as it stands now, our minimum wage is actually quite appropriate for our island and our economy right now. The latest stats in terms of average wage for both Guam and both for the U.S., right now we sit at, based on the most recent Bureau of Labor and Statistics occupational survey of 2021, we sit at an average of $19 for our wages. And prior to that, in 2019, it was an average of $17. So we can see there has been an increase. And that increase is actually proportional, or it's in line with what the U.S. has seen as well. In fact, we're just a little bit ahead in pacing. So in the U.S., it was 25 in 2017, and now it's 28. But for our particular economy and what our economy can support, we say 19 is appropriate in that there's been many, many studies on minimum wage throughout the world, how to work with minimum wage, what minimum wage works best for economies, and probably the very best study I've seen comes out of the European Union. They did a pretty extensive study, and based on that study, they say for a well-functioning economy that balances all needs out. Generally, a minimum wage should represent about 50% of the average wage of that particular economy. So you can see that we're right on track with that for our economy. If we can go to the next slide. So let's look at the back. The other thing we just want to make sure stays in the minds of our senators is the purpose of minimum wage and minimum wage jobs. They serve a vital purpose in an economy and in a society in that they provide an entryway for first-time workers, people without any experience whatsoever, to get into the workplace. They also provide an avenue for newly immigrant workers, as well as newly paroled and your low-skilled workers. The fact is that there are individuals that want to get into the marketplace, but for whatever reason, lack of skills, lack of any experience with that particular job, just entering into society, they don't have what is necessary to apply for a higher paid job. And the fact is, the minimum wage and the minimum wage jobs sit there to provide that avenue for those individuals. It absolutely serves a purpose. So if we flip the side, but there's a balance in terms of what companies can do in terms of providing those jobs. So yes, anybody will tell you the employer-employee relationship, it's symbiotic. They both need each other. Employees need strong businesses because those businesses provide the work for them to do. Likewise, employers need strong employees to come in and work for them. So it works back and forth. And if we flip the side, studies have shown that when looking at the minimum wage, keeping that in mind, that the role that it provides to allow people to enter the workplace is important, because other studies have shown that while well-intentioned, changes to minimum wage, particularly large double-digit changes to minimum wage, can, what you might say almost ironically, have an adverse effect on those that it appears to try and be an assist. And one very large study that has been noted and also quoted by Dr. Jones was a Federal Reserve Board meta-study, so looking at all different minimum wage studies. And the one key kind of thing that they could pull out from all of these different studies, some had different points, but one uniform kind of message was that when you have large increases with minimum wage, it harms the prospects of unskilled workers, and ultimately it doesn't solve poverty when you look at that. So if we flip over the slide. There's been some other recent studies around minimum wage, particularly in Washington State, where we know that they had they've increased their wage a bit, as well as California. And both of those studies, which were done by University of Washington and UC Berkeley, showed indeed, particularly for a particular time period right after with the large double-digit increases, that it did actually reduce employment for those minimum wage earners, in that the companies that were providing that had to do cutbacks. Either they slowed the hiring, or they reduced hours, or they actually had to reduce positions for that time period. And if you flip over the side, we can see that in our next slide, what was happening around the $15 increase or $15 minimum wage in Seattle, that particularly the ones that had the greatest negative impact were actually the individuals perhaps that it was targeting to help, because it actually resulted in some reduction of employment. From our own studies, if you flip the side, here in Guam, there are actually our minimum wage earners comprise roughly, depending on the surveys that you look at, but generally speaking, both from surveys that the Employers Council has done as well as surveys from Bureau of Labor and Statistics, about 10% of our working population is in the rough minimum wage area. But what's important to look at is what positions those are, and particularly where they're being paid. In other words, what industries and what particular business types. So the vast majority are in the hospitality, retail, leisure type industry, kind of our engine, the main industry that we're in, with janitors, restaurant employees, kitchen and cashiers making up the vast bulk of our minimum wage. And if you flip over, increases to that, especially if we go up to the $15, would result in millions of dollars of extra expense for those employers, those particular employers. And again, they're the employers that really kind of fuel our engine of our economy, so it would do that. And the simple fact is, and you can flip the next slide, is if those costs are given to those employers, they're just going to have to pull off somewhere else. So it's going to mean a reduction in capital improvements, it's going to be a reduction in marketing, it's going to be a reduction perhaps in certain services and positions. And probably one area that you're going to see an immediate impact, a couple of key areas, is of course is in restaurants. And that's what the Seattle survey, or Seattle research showed, pretty much 10% knock-on immediate increase just to accommodate that. And the other area that people don't talk about too much is small business and non-profit type organizations like private schools. Private schools will probably have a pretty hard impact, which the knock-on effect is going to be a huge portion of Guam sends their kids to private schools. And so people are going to feel it there immediately as well, because our private schools on island are not private schools like with tons of money. They're mostly, in fact, they all are religious based, so they're running on pretty much empty, to be honest. So you're going to see that. So again, what we ask is, what is the impetus? What's bringing this up? Is there any particular thing that's driving this? And as we discuss, to think back, what is the purpose of the minimum wage, and particularly the minimum wage position, as well as where is that minimum wage being paid, by whom, what industries, what specific businesses, your small business, your nonprofit, and to whom. So who is it being paid to? It's being paid to those individuals that are seeking an entryway into the labor market with the intention of moving on into better paying jobs. So we ask that you just take that into consideration as we have these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gill. Just for clarification, what is your occupation?
I'm the Executive Director of the Employers Council.
Okay, so that's your employment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Senator Dueñas, you're recognized for any comments?
Jesus Monsi, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Klitsky, you're right. I do not have any questions for this excellent presentation, but to let you know on the record, I'll be posting this on my poster board in the office.
Thank you, Senator.
So I'm so glad the Executive Director of the Employers Council came forward, because if there's any takeaway that I've had today here, particularly understanding by the numbers, first of all, one of the reasoning those who typically want to raise the minimum wage, and they put an excuse sometimes of, well, there seems like there's never really a good time to do this, but I'm seeing this would be a really bad time to do this. Would you concur with that?
I would. Again, fortunately, things are getting much better, and we're getting back on track after the pandemic. But it's been very hard for particular businesses. And so they've eaten a lot of expense, and they've lost a lot of revenue, but they're back on their feet, and they're just getting back into a good position. They're slowly getting back. And I think particularly coming off of that, coming off of a recent pay rate, a very recent minimum wage increase, And the simple fact that there's some powers out there that we're not completely in control of. Because we rely so much on tourism, we can work very hard, but we still need those tourists to come in, and it's certainly not at that point yet. And we know that that's kind of the genesis of a lot of our funding on island. We are fortunate to have at least the dual prong of the tourism and the military, so that we're not all in one basket, but tourism is so very important to so many workers specifically, but then the knock-on effects. So I would say right now would be a very, well, it's hard, but right now particularly, coming off of those couple of those key incidents, the pandemic, tourism still not getting back to what it was, and then the recent increase.
So Catherine, I'm sure you probably enjoyed the presentation as well. Just to, once again, by the numbers, this substantiates what the Chamber of Commerce has been saying, predominantly that basically only 10% of our entire workforce is really at the entry level, if that, and those are really service industry jobs. And so it seems like Mary, Rhodes, and yourself, really one of your main points is this compression issue is really real, because that seems like it's going to take the biggest chunk, because you might give some 10% of the employees possibly a wage increase, but you're definitely going to have to hit the higher part too, which is 90% of most of the workforce. And as Mary said, 20% of those, only 20% of the economy is carrying employers are carrying most of that weight. So that seems like it hits top and bottom. Would you concur?
I agree, and I think that, again, you've heard us have these discussions over the years that we do what we can, we do our best. I think we've got businesses that care about their employees. There's, we want our employees to succeed. And, I get, at the Chamber, we do have a turnaround, right? I'm lucky that I have a really, really good team, but I tell you, I'm really, really proud when someone says, Kat, I'm gonna leave the Chamber and I'm gonna go to another private sector job because they're gonna offer me more money and more benefits, right? It makes me proud because it shows to me that, we've given them all of these great skills to do something that will make them better, to give them benefits, to give them a salary that, that meets the quality of life that they're aspiring to, right? So, again, we have to allow that to happen and not have something like this be mandated.
So just my closing point, because to my tourism friends here, yes, we're going to contemplate the LEAP. One thing I want to say is we believe right now, though, the LEAP proportions are inverted. The governor has still quite a large pot of money. The 15-5 match coming from government and 5, from ARP. Many of us are not in tune to that. But we're going to entertain it. We're going to put it on the floor, and we're going to advocate heavily that amount remain. But, just be aware. We're there for you. We want to get this done. But it really looks inverted right now, and I hope you guys can understand. We're going to have the debate, and many of us believe that. Mary, you want to comment on that?
Just related to your earlier comments about the 10% that Mrs. Gale had shared, is just as, again, a reminder that even though the 10% represents those jobs also have service charge and tips, right? If they're a tipped employee. So of course, what's reported to BLS or Department of Labor is just their wage. It's not their total compensation. So that needs to be clarified, that of those jobs, a lot of those employees do receive service charge in addition to their hourly wage. And then a lot of them are also tipped employees, which they do report themselves, but those employees do also have a total compensation plan that far outweighs their wage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll allow the panel, and then I might have a follow-up if you'll allow later. Thank you.
Senator Shelton, birthday girl, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Senator Quinata. Hafa day, everyone. Thank you all for your testimony, the information that you gave this afternoon. And thank you, Senator Quinata, for starting this conversation. I don't know how many business owners and managers have approached me since you broke the news that you were interested in mandating a $15 minimum wage to say, that's going to kill us, we're going to shut down, we're going to fire everyone because we can't, or let people go because we can't afford that price. And I know Senator Quinata is very excited to move this forward to increase the quality of life for our people, but I appreciate that he's brought us here to have this conversation before doing that, because I think that the more people we have at the table will help us make a better decision. And I appreciate it, Ms. Rhodes, that you brought to us the previous public law from the 32nd Guam legislature to ensure that we have a economic report for us to make the educated decision based on. We have lots of information that, as Jovina said, has come out of the University of Guam. The Department of Labor, I'm sure, will give us lots of information going forward as well. And I think that I'd like to implore the chair that we work together to have this kind of report, this study done before we make any decision. As you may recall, I talked to many of you over the last few terms during the budget time and the passage of the minimum wage law with Senator San Augustine. I included it in the budget bill. Many people were not happy, but I wanted to ensure that there was some kind of compromise to increase the minimum wage at that time because it was sorely needed. Though it did hurt many businesses, it helped folks who were not receiving any benefits during the pandemic. While we saw businesses still receiving PPP and then later on the LEAP, and now we don't have many of those programs existing anymore. The federal aid has stopped, it's slowed down, and hopefully we'll get another round of LEAP in a few days for our businesses, but we want to ensure that we are fair across the board. We're helping our businesses, we're helping our people. The main reason why we wanted the LEAP in the first place, why we wanted to increase the minimum wage, was to give the folks who were in the middle, not receiving any kind of assistance, something to keep our people working. So we want to ensure that we're not going to put a mandate on our businesses that will later down the line we'll see will in fact let the people go that we're trying so hard to help. So I appreciate, Senator Quinata, your openness here to have this dialogue with us, and I hope that we can work together in the next several months to get this study together, to work together with the industry, the Department of Labor, our folks at GEDA, to do this right all together. So sujos masi, everyone.
Thank you, and we'll go back to Senator Dueñas.
Yeah, so just one follow-up with GEDA. We appreciate the testimony, Tina, on the benchmarking, but I want to make sure we get this on the record again. And I know in a former life when I was a board member on the Workforce Investment Board, I see labor here. One of the biggest challenges as we try to move from and balance our economy with more of the higher paying wage jobs that was discussed earlier and the like. I mean, the key thing that's always a factor from businesses that we're looking at Guam when I was working on attracting other industries, and the discussion that you had was the labor force. Meaning that the high jobs can be available, but a lot of companies won't come unless we can produce the labor, unless we can get the educational institutions to where they have that caliber of individual that they can hire. Because bringing in labor a lot of times, particularly in that level, is expensive because it comes with perks like housing and transportation sometimes and whatever else it takes. So, isn't the presentation really geared a lot towards that too? I mean, the minimum wage is one thing, but really do we need to buckle down and work a lot harder to make it more attractive for those businesses who want to come and enhance our economy?
Absolutely, and I think we are seeing that growth. I believe we have GCC that does a lot of telecommunications certification. We have the University of Guam that has just done their School of Engineering. So we'll definitely, that is part of the matrix to include the filling in of employment on the higher end as well.
So maybe our really, really strong push in our secondary education and our Department of Education as we push forward, and as the good executive director of the council shared with us, you know, the private schools, we got to make sure that they're held up too, because I mean, those are sacrifices that parents are making, and that one extra $100 maybe, you know, in tuition might just have them pull those children out. And, you know, we know our charter schools now are showing a lot of promise, particularly career tech ed. You know, it really is now the feeder up to University of Guam, and their movement towards math and science and all that will bring in terms of technology. So, yeah, I think that, you know, these are great ideas, but I think we really need to push really hard to make sure we increase capability of those who are coming up to really secure those higher level jobs, and that's really where I think we're going to be getting you know, our people to have a much better opportunity going forward in their lives. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Dueñas. So, with that being said, it's been a very fruitful conversation. We definitely don't have any legislation proffered at this time. I want to assure everyone that's listening, all the business community that's been calling me, again, there's no legislation drafted. No one's getting shot in the foot right now. So, you know, I just want to put it out there and clear the record that there's no legislation drafted. Ms. Lujan, you're recognized.
Senator, let me say this. While the economic recovery is still remain somewhat slower than all of us would like, what's good about opening the door as you have today, to opening the legislative body to hear input from the community on key issues affecting the quality of life, the cost of living, you know, even income earnings at the minimum wage level, is the opportunity to lead a strategic response to what would benefit Guam as a, okay, I'm biased to tourism because I'm in tourism, as a destination of choice. If you follow the legislative proceedings that you have conducted thus far, even only as members of the 37th Guam legislature in the 4 months you've been in place, and you take a look at the interaction that you've had with different aspects of the community, you're going to find that there's a lot of nuggets of opportunity that have been brought before you, shared by the different segments throughout, whether they are educators, public agencies, private tourism companies, and so forth. There is, and I will say again, there is an excellent, opportune time for a response. And that authority rests with the legislature. Defining policy that is going to be bring the good for the people of Guam and this island we call home rests in your hands. Now, let me just step back and point out a few things. Mary Rhodes here talked a lot about the vocational educational programs that the hospitality industry take advantage of and work in partnership with those in education. During the initial LEAP hearings, okay, there were some nuggets that were shared there, such as folks in the tourism transportation sector, for example. If you're in the transportation company, even if you were given or you had before you the opportunity to provide a service, many transportation companies are facing difficulties because they can't get employees with a B2 license. And I can go on. The point I'm making here is success doesn't come, you know, by happenstance. Tourism didn't generate the 1.7 million visitors in 2019 by happenstance. That was the outcome of very deliberate strategic decisions that were made in joint cooperation between the public and the private sector. And I'll say this, there are there are key people out there that are perfectly willing to come together and support this effort from the standpoint that collectively, such a strategy can be hardened. And I'm not talking about something that's going to take, 5-10-year plan. No, it's not that difficult. It really isn't, because fortunately, we're at that stage where the emergency is now passed, where, okay, arrivals is such as you're seeing, and we have a buildup happening that's leveraging a revenue surplus to the government of Guam. Ultimately, the responsibility and the authority to define territorial-wide policy rests with you. And I'll say this, if you take the time to put these nuggets of advice and tidbits of insight together from across the island, public and private, I assure you, coming back with a reasonable, relatively achievable short-term strategy for Guam's comeback is gonna leverage a fruit that we all are gonna benefit from. Now, we in the private sector are here to give you that support and to give you the assistance that you may need. We're really, I can say personally, I'm very gratified, Senator Quinata, that while the prospect for raising the minimum wage has been on your table since your early days of running for office, that you haven't gone so far along, but that instead you have decided and opted to take the time to listen and to attain input from all the segments that are going to impact your legislative deliberations. And it's not that hard. It really isn't. There are countless of people and businesses that are more than enthusiastic to lend assistance in this deliberation, because we all want Guam to experience a resounding comeback. We acknowledge that there have been impediments that have slowed this down for our island, but the positive signs are on the horizon. We see Japan downgrading COVID. We see the rest of Asia, resuming international travel. And I forgive my biased perspective on tourism, because that's a perspective I can share that contributes to your deliberation. And again, as has been said time and time again, this industry was documented at $2.4 billion, without a doubt, right? The academicians documented that. And if you combine the level of federal and local assistance that's been extended to small businesses in the pandemic and following the pandemic, we're talking about federal and local aid of $600 million, including the $62 million in LEAP 1. So take that $600 million against what an industry that normally, under normal conditions, would perform at $2.4 billion. And you can understand the disparity and the degree of struggles that those of us in tourism continue to see at varying levels. Now, while that's on the table, there are signs of positive recovery. And I encourage you and implore all of you to seize the opportunity to put these little nuggets of advice and insight together from the standpoint that can leverage a short-term, speedier recovery than normal, right? So we're here to lend that help, and please don't hesitate. Maybe some of us that are sitting here today can share some notes that we can forward to the committee for further consideration. But I assure you, this entire community, public and private, in tourism or in other indirect small business commercial operations, we are willing to lend assistance to get the job done. It's not impossible. By all reports, okay, there's pent-up demand, particularly in the Asia-Pacific Rim, for international travel. And that opportunity is right before us, but it will not come by happenstance. It will not come by injurious measures, as we spoke earlier, but it can come if those of you who have this authority and whom we trust, take the initiative to lead the discussions that can lead to a tangible short-term strategy that's going to restore a favorable economic climate such as we had that caused tourism to grow the way it did before COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lujan, again. Appreciate those comments. Again, there's no legislation proffered. I just want to clear the record. Again, we are here to discuss the possibility of a measure, but I have no commitment at this time to implementing any legislation. I just wanted to bring everyone to the table. I'm not a business owner, but I know the business of a business owner is to make profit and make sure he has a good night's rest, right? So, or she. Women, women empowerment, because the senator said. So, and there's more women at the table. I don't know what happened. Where's all the businessmen? So, I honestly don't want to see Mr. Kloppenberg's idea of employment opportunity from a foreign country. As much as we have H-2B visa, Casper Bauer, my apologies. H-2 workers, we need the skilled labor, but I don't think we need to outsource any skilled labor locally. We just need to really put the kids back into the train track, because I come from the generation, they are a different breed, trust me, I know. We can't even keep people bush cutting in these private businesses as well. I don't know what the difference is these days, but we definitely need to. I'm a big proponent of workforce development. That is one of my campaign pillars. So you have my commitment in that regard. I also wanted to make sure that, I brought not only I'm not here to represent only the little people, right? But I'm also here to represent you guys' interests. Whether or not you vote for me or not, I don't really care. That's not my priority. I'm here to represent the people that really don't have a voice. As much as you guys are very successful individuals on the table, I applaud you guys for your businesses and all your investments into the island, and to the certain individuals you hire in whatever businesses you guys are invested in. Again, without a doubt, you guys have invested tremendous amount of money and time into the island. So it's not with any regard to disrespect you guys. I'm just trying to, find common ground to find whether we do an incremental 50 cents or we do $15 tomorrow. That's not at the table right now. I just wanted to bring everyone to the table. Unfortunately, there's not much participation. I would need an economist to tell me what's the do's and nots of the current time. Nationwide, there has been seismic increments of wages, and that's really where the spark of this conversation came from, Ms. Gill. I didn't know if you wanted me to answer that question during your presentation, but I'm going to answer it now. That given that there has been a lot of rise in and increasing of salaries in the states, obviously that signals something on my table as well. I'm very forward. I don't like paper. I like to look at everything that pops up online. So whatever pops up on my email, I always look into it as much as possible, and I try to drive policy from that perspective. With that being said, Mr. Casper, want to say something?
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. I just wanted to add one other factor to it that maybe wasn't presented, and that is that if I was going to look at Hawaii, I could wholly support minimum wage increases, because the Hawaiian market, the majority of it comes from North America. Canada, North America, they have similar economies, they have similar pay rates, and it's a domestic market, basically. In our situation, our bulk of our customers come from Asia, where the wage rates are lower. So for them to come to here, it's like double the price of what you would travel from the States to Hawaii. They need that much more money if they're in some of these places. Koreans, the Korean won and the Japanese yen, they don't match the US dollar. And then when you really think about things, Japan and Korea has now been enticed by Southeast Asia. At one point, they could not trust Southeast Asia destinations, Vietnam, Thailand, etc. They had kind of a mixed feeling of its safety or, its modernness. But that is not the problem anymore. Southeast Asia has blossomed, and I'll tell you what, I think I mentioned it at the other time I was presenting, but the entire inflation rate for Japan last year during the pandemic was only 2.5%. If it was $100 before the pandemic, it's only $102.50. Korea is like at 5%, and Thailand and Vietnam are down at, one is 4% and the other is 3%. So imagine what their minimum wages are in Southeast Asia, and investors are pouring into Southeast Asia, and they can do things that we can't even do on Guam. They're a more exotic destination. We're trying to get people back for the 4th, 5th, and 6th time, not the first time. And these Korean and Japanese travelers, which make up the bulk of our travel industry, they've been here many times. And we need to make sure that we have an opportunity to bring them back again for whatever reason versus to explore Southeast Asia at a higher rate than we can recover. And so what's been going on right now is they've been going there. And in the past, they were concerned and they didn't have real information to feel safe in some of those places, but now there's ways of trusting websites and tour operations, and they're coming back full force. And the Japanese tour agents, whether it's JTB and others, they're really pushing Southeast Asia, short destination, and Okinawa. And we know this, like I mentioned before, during the time when the bases were closing down under BRAC, tourism held this island up. And now that the military buildup is here, we can use that to help us stay in the tourism market from the military side as a fair exchange. But when we look at the stateside component, we somehow transfer it, but there becomes a line across the ocean where our customers aren't coming from the States. They're coming from places where, if I'm in the Philippines, this would be an expensive destination, right? The same for those other places. So I want you to understand how much we appreciate the fairness in minimum wage, but right now I don't think anybody's going to be paid minimum wage at all. And those people that have those lower paid jobs may be qualified for many, many federal assistance programs that cover the gap that we can't. And one last part that I'll mention is this: is we can talk about PPP, and we can talk about LEAP, and we can talk about those things. Those were just trying to hold those employees that we paid all that money out, and they got the benefit. The companies still have losses, and in a lot of cases, the companies have accumulated huge debts because we never expected it to go beyond this part. When Japan, we thought, would open in September of last year, out of nowhere they said, 3 months stay in Japan, then another 3 months, and now another 3 months, 9 months. And to fund that extra uneven planned thought that Japan would continue to do this for about a year. Also at the same time, our requirements for certain visas is more prolonged than any other area I can see in the United States. So I think the opportunity to discuss this in the future would be the future as we settle in. And I appreciate all of the patience that you have and your wisdom too. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again, Mr. Kasperbauer. Again, thank you guys for your continuous investment in our people on the island of Guam. I know that we do have a lot of continuous issues looming in the coming weeks and days and months. We are definitely, there is legislation proffered to support you guys, LEAP, I think 3.0 already. So, And I also wanted to say I used to be a server for the record, so I've been at the little maintenance worker too. I've been a funeral director. A lot of people don't think I don't know how I became senator, but I'm very blessed for the opportunity. But you know, along with my colleague Senator Shelton, I used to work for it a long time, and then she told me, "Go run yourself." I'm just kidding. But with that being said, you know, we are going to continue to hear some more testimony. I hope to have more fruitful conversations from individuals that most likely will benefit from minimum wage studies and increments, possibly. With that being said, if there are no further testimonies or questions, the committee appreciates your participation in today's informational briefing and will continue to receive written testimony until Friday, May 12, 2023. Please address testimony to Senator Roy A.B. Quinata, Chairperson, Committee on Infrastructure, Economic Development, Simon Sanchez High School, Disability Service, Self-Determination, Historic Preservation, Housing, Public Economy, Guam Build-Up, and can be dropped to the mail room here at the Guam Congress Building or sent to me, Office of Senator Quinata at guamlegislature.org or WhatsApp 472-4826. This concludes today's informational hearing. It is currently 3:42 p.m. and this public hearing is now adjourned. Take care. Siduos Masi. God bless.